Don't put your yield at risk, put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
Export's very, very important. One of the major trade markets for Canadian meat products is, of course, China. And there's no shortage of issues with China from a Canadian perspective. And then when you work in the U.S. side of the equation, things get really muddy, especially in weeks like this. But the work still goes on. And joining us right now to talk about some of that work is the CEO of the Canadian Meat Council, as well as CEO of Canadian Pork. It is Chris White. Chris, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, Sean. Nice to see you. Nice
Hey.
to always to talk with you, and thanks for making time for me.
Yeah, well, likewise. Now, fresh off a trip to China, tell us about the length of the trip and the purpose.
It was about 10 days. Purpose is ostensibly to go over every 3 to 4 months, meet with Chinese officials, meet with officials at our embassy and Chinese NGOs to continue to build a relationship, talk about issues that they may have with our sector and any issues that we may have in terms of access or frustrations that we may have, and try and figure out ways in which we can move the issues forward constructively, and then just to ensure that our officials at the embassy or the consulates have a good understanding of what we're trying to do and achieve in China.
A lot of focus as of late on tariffs that China put on Canadian pork. Is there a status update of that?
They continue to exist. I can't imagine that they will be taken off until a new government is in place, and particularly the new government sends a signal, and that either will be a signal similar to what we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months with the UK and the Australian governments, which was effectively sort of a not necessarily a reset, but a recalibration of the relationship. And certainly talking to Chinese officials, they are in a wait and see mode. What will the new government's tone be with them? Where will there be some issues of commonality? And in particular, will the new government do anything with respect to reducing tariffs on Chinese EVs, which is a major irritant for them?
Yeah, bit of a puzzle though, because the U.S. seems to be asking a lot of trade partners around the world to be tougher on China.
Well, I think that's true. On the other hand, if you perhaps saw last night
Yeah.
in remarks that Trump made in the Oval Office, he was saying that he thinks there will be a deal with China and that the tariffs will be reduced. So I think you look at what he's saying, that will take some pressure off of other countries vis-a-vis China. And certainly you look at some of the efforts that the EU has made, or some of the comments recently with respect to reducing tariffs on the EVs as well. So I think, much like we have all been enduring for the last number of months, all this economic churn, the comments last night coming out of the Oval, I think certainly will help to just, not necessarily calibrate everybody, but just allow everybody to say, or to at least feel that there is a path forward. And I think certainly up until last night, that was not the case. There was a concern that, China had said they would not escalate further the tariffs, but we are so dependent on what takes place out of Washington and the Trump administration that I think those comments at least give the new government, when they come in, some opportunity to find a path forward.
Canadian beef. Now, not a tariff, but that atypical case, is that still causing us grief trying to get product into China?
Well, we're not back. Certainly, when I speak to Chinese officials, what they will say is they have all of the information they need from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, from our embassy, and from industry. And so they're waiting. We're sort of in a holding pattern, right? So again, I think it would be great to be back in, because the demographics of the Chinese middle class are only going to grow, and it's a very, excuse me, important market as we look to diversify perhaps from the U.S. a little bit. So we are always hopeful, and every time I meet with Chinese officials, I gently remind them, pardon me, that we would like to be back in. And to the advantage of the Chinese consumer, both the Canadian pork and Canadian beef is world class quality, but as you would also appreciate and know, it's underpinned by world class science, which differentiates the product from many other countries.
Yeah, and one of the things about China too, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there's not a lot of transparency on the timeline. We've seen this with
Um,
trait development where it's just
sure.
sort of like we wake up on a Saturday, it's like, oh, approved, we're good.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think I would also say though that at times we have the same frustration with CFIA, right? That government
Okay,
makes a
fair. Yeah, yeah,
policy,
yeah, yeah.
right? Um, but I think the other consideration and what I say to our members and to my board is food security is such a critical issue as it is in most countries, but in China in particular, right? Because you've got a population of 1.4 billion, and they've got product coming in from almost every country in the world as either the number one and number two export market. So for them to make a determination with respect to an atypical case of BSE, it's not like it's a small decision because it has implications and ramifications. So would we like it to have been resolved by now? Absolutely. But at the same time, we have to be mindful and respectful that they have a process and it's their country. We want our product to go in, and we don't want to, do anything that would cause them any further irritation or angst. So we just have to respect that when they're ready, they're ready. And I'm optimistic that we will be back in.
Yeah.
But when is always the unknown.
With the tariffs on pork, are we still able to ship? Is pork still moving into that market, or is the tariff prevent it from doing so?
No, we're fortunate in the sense that it wasn't 100% like it was on canola. So it's at 25%. So pork is still going in, and we expect that it will continue to go in. Obviously, the margins will be less, and some companies may decide that they may want to look at other markets that don't have not imposed a tariff. But as of now, at least, that we still do have some product going in for sure.
Yeah, and I'm assuming depending on the transaction, how that tariff amount is handled, it could be different. It's not a consistent like you're paying, I'm paying. There's probably a lot of different versions of that, I would assume.
Yeah, there is. I mean, certainly we don't get into the business lines for our
Yeah.
members, but certainly anecdotally, to your point, yeah, there's a number of ways in which companies are trying to ensure that they continue to not just get pork in, but that they maintain their relationships with their Chinese customers, with their Chinese traders, and etc.
I'm curious, being on the ground in China, you've been to China lots in your career.
Yes.
What's what's the can't speak for them, but I guess people are interested. Like, what do people think about Canada? When like, are we persona non grata, or is there this relationship can be repaired, or like, what kind of
Sure.
reception are you receiving?
It's on balance, it's quite warm, frankly. I think, historically, Canada and China have enjoyed a long-standing bilateral relationship, over 50 years. And certainly there's a lot of areas of commonality. Canada co-hosted on behalf of China COP15 in Montreal a couple of years ago. There's a lot of tourism to China, or there has been historically, educational opportunities and transfers. Certainly like there is on the part of Canadians, there's some lingering frustration and anger with respect to the two Michaels. Conversely, on the part of the Chinese, they feel that's the same way with respect to Meng Wanzhou. But certainly when I talk to Chinese officials, both in China and at the embassy in Ottawa here, they're very clear, right? They want to find a path forward. They want to find ways in which they can, excuse me, continue to enjoy a good, productive bilateral relationship with China. But for them, they feel that there has been a level of disrespect coming out of the previous government, much like we would also say, right, that we feel that there have been instances and examples where we could point to. But I do get the sense in talking to officials that they're looking to move past that. So when this new government comes in, it is an opportunity to recalibrate or reestablish a more maybe transactional relationship, and it's not so emotive. Uh, you know, so there is a strong desire, and certainly I've never felt uncomfortable, or I've never been, no one's ever been objectively rude to me in a meeting or anything like that. They're perplexed at times in terms of why Canada has done X or Y or Z. But I would also say that there's a bit of empathy that I've been to China now 3 times so far this year, and as the escalation of U.S. tariffs kept kept rising when I was in China, there was empathy for Canada, right? How could they be doing this to you? You're their best friend. You're their best partner. Um, So no, I would say on balance, Sean,
Okay.
there's a desire to get back to what it has been historically.
And overall, all that being said, for Canadian meat products, a lot of times here we talk about beef and pork, but there's more. That the Chinese market is an important market because of that changing middle class that you spoke about.
No, it's a significant market. Certainly on the pork side because there's part of the product that goes, which are called the offals, which is basically the only market that we can send it to. And if it doesn't go there, then it ends up in rendering. The point I was making about the middle class is right now there's about 450 million, Chinese middle class. In the next 15 years or so, that's expected to double. And as that middle class doubles, there's also an increasing shift in their desire for higher quality
Yeah.
proteins. So that's why it's really important that we get beef back into that market because right now the Brazilians have probably about a 55-60% share of that market. Pardon me, and certainly other countries as well. And we know the quality of Canadian beef, and we want to be part of that. The advantage the Brazilians have is that Lula has gone, a number of times to Brazil.
Yep.
So we were fortunate last fall when Minister Macaulay went, and certainly we're hoping that again with the new government we will see some more high-profile visits of ministers, and perhaps even in the next few years, Prime Minister to President bilateral meeting.
Yeah, Chris, I want your personal opinion on this. And or it could be for on behalf of CMC. You tell me. But do we need more people on the ground in markets like China? Like, do we? That's
100%.
that's sorry. What's that?
100%.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Okay, because this comes up a lot in my discussions. My perception has been that
Yes.
from you're more in the know here, and you've been on the ground there lots. Give us the why. Why do we need more resources on the ground?
Because much like it is in Ottawa, when you're looking to influence a policy decision of a minister or of a government, you can't just come in once or twice a year. It's a very slow and incremental and very tactical build. You have to build the trust, build the understanding, build and provide really cogent analysis as to why. So if you're only in once or twice a year, from an industry perspective, well, that's not going to do it. From an official's perspective, China is very hierarchical, but it builds from the ground up. So, we go in and we have meetings with our counterparts, and we may get some meetings with officials. That's very useful. Our ambassador, former Ambassador Barton was terrific. Ambassador May is doing a great job for us and her team. But they're also have limitations, and when we're competing against many other countries that have high profile visits. So the week I was there, the Spanish Prime Minister had just had visited. Next month in May, Lula is coming from Brazil. There's an expectation that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, is going to be there this fall.
Yeah.
And then last fall, when I was there, the German Chancellor, if I'm not mistaken, had been there. But a series of high profile visits. And Minister Jolie had a couple of meetings last year, but we just need to have that sustained presence, because what the signal the Chinese are often looking for and saying that they're looking for is that this market is important to you. And if you're only there once or twice a year versus other countries that have larger embassies or consulates or larger trade delegations that are constantly coming through, their perception is, well, you tell me it's important, Sean, but it's not borne out by the fact that you've only been here once or twice and you've gone to maybe a trade show, but you haven't come to Beijing to meet with any officials. So you can say it's important, but your actions belie a different reality from our perspective.
Yep.
So that's why the more sustained presence is really important, and that's why, as I was saying to you, going over 3 or 4 months is really important, just to kind of touch base and to remind them that we're here, we want to build a relationship. What you may not be aware of is that the meat industry is actually opening an advocacy office later this year in Beijing. And it's for that very reason, right? To have a sustained presence on the ground, much like we do in Ottawa and in other capitals.
Yeah, fascinating. Chris, really appreciate you joining us. Great insights. I appreciate the insights from your recent trip last week, and really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Always nice to talk to you, Sean. Take care.